Hey folks, this is Jason Lewis, the producer of the From the Shadows podcast. I just want to remind you about our website, fromtheshadowspodcast.com. We have a Facebook page. We would appreciate it if you like and follow. Also, join our discussion group on Facebook called After the Shadows. We have a Twitter feed. Please follow us on Twitter. It can be found with @podcast_from. Follow us on Instagram @From the Shadows Podcast. We have a YouTube channel. Go to the search bar at YouTube and put From the Shadows Podcast, and please subscribe to that channel. We are also on the Odyssey Radio Network, and we can be found there at odyssey1.com. We're still on the traditional podcatchers that everybody loves to listen to us on. We get a lot of feedback, so please rate the podcast and communicate with whether you're on Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, or Google Podcasts. We're there, and we appreciate it when you leave comments for us. Well, that's all I have for you right now, folks, and thanks for being a part of the From the Shadows podcast family. So with that being said, let's get this episode started. Now I'm going to turn you over to your host, Shane Grove.
Hey, welcome everybody to the From the Shadows podcast. I'm your host, Shane Grove, and joining me as always, and I do mean as always because he's the only constant, is Jason, the super producer. How's it going today, Jason?
Doing well. Greetings, everybody.
So we're going to get right into this episode because we've been pretty excited to have this gentleman on. He's a very accomplished TV producer, and he produces some really cool shows we're going to let him kind of talk about. Mr. Tobin Long, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Shane. Thanks very much, and thanks, Jason, for having me on.
Yes, we're glad to have you on because you have a really cool job. Don't try to sandbag it with us. You have a job that we all want.
Yeah, we would love to have that job.
No matter how bad you're going to try to make it sound, you have a job that we would all love to have. So Tobin, why don't you tell our listeners what it is that you do, some of the shows that you help produce, and we'll just go from there.
Sure. Well, I guess the good place to start would be just to say that I'm an associate producer, but I'm also an interview director for a couple different paranormal shows, and I've been doing that for a couple of seasons now on some of these shows. And the first one I started working on was Haunted Hospitals, which is on Travel Channel, and I helped on the development of that show from its initial idea, so the original concept, and brought it into production. And then after that, we created a second show called Paranormal 911. And most recently, the show that's going to be airing on August 21st, same day as this interview.
Today, we're doing the interview today, but we'll make sure that we'll put a link on our Facebook stuff to have everybody go check out the show tonight.
For sure.
So that they can.
Yeah, I know it's a little late to the game for me to get on board on tape, but it's Paranormal Nightshift, and that's tonight on Travel Channel as well. It's sort of a trilogy trifecta of paranormal fun.
Nice.
Yeah. Is it better than the Child's Play movies trifecta, or is it?
I would say that the Child's Play movies have their own. Something to offer the fans for sure. They're a lot of fun, but I think ours are a little more scary because they tend to be a little more realistic because they come from real people.
I love that politically correct producer answer. I love that.
I'm not gonna lie. The first Child's Play movie was fun, but also scary when I saw it when I was probably about 11 years old. So
yeah. We just did an interview with the guy, and he was talking about Robert the Doll, and which Child's Play is based on. And Robert the Doll is an actual doll down in Florida that's housed in a museum. And that is a lot scarier than the actual Child's Play movie, actually, to consider that this doll's down there and all the crazy haunted stuff that happens around it that is documented. So that's, that's the real life stuff, which brings it back to what you guys are doing, investigating and putting out there the real life stories. That's, to me, those are the things that are way more frightening than a movie, because it's real.
Yeah, and it's amazing the variety of stories we get, but also the similarities make it interesting as well. And some stories are definitely scarier than others. Some are actually truly frightening, and some just leave you going, "What was really going on there?" And that's the greatest thing about it. There's always a mystery behind each and every one of these things. It's hard to really nail down a source for the particular paranormal experience that our eyewitnesses have actually experienced.
Now, how did you end up in this genre of television? Because, I mean, did you set out saying this is the sort of stuff I wanted to do, or were you in other sort of, did you do comedy? Did you do other stuff? I mean, how'd you start out in television that kind of led you down this path?
That's a good question. So I have a bit of a natural history background, and so it means I keep an eye to science and an ear to science. And so I was hired on a show years and years ago called Time Warp, which was a show where we took high-speed cameras to investigate phenomenon you normally don't see with the human eye. And we sometimes it would just be something really simple, like, what does an egg look like smashing on the floor if you drop it, to, hey, what happens when you put lighters in a blender? And
oh, jeez.
So I was a story producer on that, and we had to use our science brain to figure out, okay, what are we going to see, and how do we describe what's actually happening on camera when you see it? So what are the physics involved? What's the chemistry involved? And so I, just from having my brain into the science realm, I could help explain those things really simply to our not only our cast and crew and our directors to figure out how they film it or what they're filming, but also just to the audience when it comes down to, like, what are we seeing? And that helped inform the scripts by our writers once we filmed everything. So I was really good at researching on different levels, and did a couple other science shows, and then I did what you would call a little bit of lifestyle programming. So that's the type of stuff that you'd see on HGTV or cooking shows. Dabbled in that, dabbled in history. And so after some more history stuff, the company that I was working for, they said, hey, you want to take a crack at doing some paranormal stuff? Because they said, we know you're a skeptic, and that's useful. And I said, I don't disagree with that. And so we started digging into the phenomenon of people having paranormal experiences in hospitals. And I have a couple people in my family that work in the health industry, and they would always tell me stories about odd things that would happen late at night in the hospital or in nursing homes. And so I understood where the subject matter was coming from. And the more I dug into it, the more I realized, and my colleagues realized, that while this really is a phenomenon specific to things like hospitals or long-term care facilities. And so we started thinking, well, why is that? And then we started talking to the people that had these stories, and that's what became Haunted Hospitals.
So going in as a skeptic, how long did it take you to start believing that maybe some of this stuff that you were interviewing people about and doing stories on was real?
That's the interesting part. So I'm still a skeptic. I'm a very open-minded skeptic, and so I don't automatically say no, that's not real, because I've had strange things happen to me in that I can't explain, that I look at it from every angle, and I was like, was that just, the light changing? Was it a car driving by a window late at night? Things like shadow figures and things like that. And, or just weird, like presence in a room where there shouldn't be anyone else in that room but you. And you start thinking like, wow, maybe there is something to these stories that these people have. And then the more and more you start to see a pattern, because these people when they tell their stories, you start to see patterns. You say, okay, there's something going on. There's a big mystery here that we either don't have the technology to understand. So there's you have to have a bit of a leap of faith to say, okay, these people, they are being truthful. Something did happen to them. Because when you start to talk to them, you realize, yeah, they are being truthful. And something that they've experienced that just is an unexplained phenomenon. All you can really do, because you can't find an answer to say what it is, you can only really label it as paranormal. So that's the skeptic part of me. Am I a believer? I definitely believe someone when they tell me something's happened to them, and that's what I focus on. Because I'm still looking for the answers myself, and I think in the future we'll learn more about paranormal phenomenon, and we'll figure out better ways to understand it, to research it, to get more data on it. And the more and more we have, the more answers we'll find about what's happening in that world of the unexplained.
Yeah, because so for people that aren't familiar, like I think with the style of show that you guys are doing, it's not like you guys are going and doing an investigation. You're just more recreating somebody's story. So it's not like you guys are going out there and trying to prove or disprove something. You're just retelling the story then that somebody's relating to you.
Yeah, and what makes, I think everyone has their own, ghost story or ghost experience story. A lot of people do. It's quite common. But what makes these particular eyewitnesses, because they work in healthcare, and a lot of them are nurses and doctors and lab technicians, they're trained under scientific method. So deduction, rationality, all lends itself to their understanding of the world. But then you throw something at them that they just can't explain. You go, okay, well, what was that? Why are they experiencing this stuff? And they can't explain it. And some of these people, they're not spiritual at all. We have like actual practicing doctors that have had something odd happen to them, and they don't have an explanation. And that's scary, because they look at it from every potential rational angle to figure it out. And what they're left with is just an answer that just is inexplicable. There's just no way for them to comprehend what happened, other than just accepting the fact that it was paranormal.
Yeah, and that's interesting that the group of people that, especially in the haunted hospitals and the haunted 911, I mean, those are people rooted in science. I mean, because if that's medicine and stuff like that is what you're going into, that's not very I mean, even though I guess you could argue that, there is a spiritual side to it, but I mean, you're going to school to learn the science of how things work, and there's always an explanation. And if this happens, this is why it happened, so to speak. And so it's interesting to see people with that sort of belief system have their belief system kind of tweaked a little bit, trying to figure out what is going on, for sure.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of the other show, Paranormal 911, is you have, EMTs and other emergency first responder personnel who are trained in methodology that is very logical. Step A becomes step B. If this is the problem, how do we deal with it? Okay, then it's C. And even with a lot of the police officers that we interview, they're trained in police sciences. Everything that they do is fact. If you've ever read a police report, it's a simple statement of facts. So these people are gathering evidence, which is data, and that's the way they see the world. Then all of a sudden something happens to them that they can't explain. It really, pushes them off kilter. a lot of them, and then they start looking for other explanations, and maybe it is something that is spiritual in nature, or again just something we can't explain, which is something that I always defer to as paranormal. It's not our everyday common existence of rationale, so it's left in its own category, and I find that really fascinating, especially with first responders when they encounter these problems, because I shouldn't say problems, paranormal phenomenon, because unlike people that work at hospitals, people that work in hospitals, doctors and nurses, lab technicians, custodians, doesn't matter, they're in that environment for a very long time. So the longer they're there, yeah, of course the chances of them experiencing paranormal probably increases, but to an ambulance driver or a police officer that's going to be dealing with something for maybe 15 minutes, maybe an hour, a couple hours tops, for them to experience something that's paranormal when their brain is attuned to the now, so dealing with the problem at hand, is really extraordinary, because that is it's going outside of what they're actually experiencing or should be experiencing that they have in the past, the logic of their experience. And that makes the paranormal in those situations really interesting. And we have to ask, why do they experience it, these first responders and police officers, in an emergency situation? And some people say maybe they have a heightened sense of awareness because the emotions that they're experiencing at the time. But again, they're very logical, and they, if you talk to a police officer or an EMT, their emotions aren't supposed to be involved whatsoever. They're supposed to not tap into that side of their brain, but yet when something paranormal happens, all that's out of the window. That's what I find about their stories really, really scary and fascinating, is that they're experiencing it at a time when they shouldn't, because they have a heightened sense of awareness. But maybe that's what opens up their doors of perception to paranormal phenomena.
Well, it does.
Wow.
It messes up their job a little bit too. They don't, like you said, they don't know how to process that. That goes against their training. A lot of time, that's why you have to go see a psychiatrist on a regular basis as a police officer. All within the department is so you can deal with those things that are outside of your scope of training to help keep you focused. So, there's definitely something to it. Yes.
Yeah, like we've had a couple of officers that witnessed some pretty horrific stuff in the line of duty, and they see it as like, that was a tragic event that I just saw, but then they think, well, what else is going on there? Like, it shouldn't have happened, and why did it happen? And a lot of them I think have come out the other side changed, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worst, unfortunately. But it's still fascinating, like those two, shows, and trying to look at these things and to highlight them, like these things happen to people that are trained in logic and in science.
Yeah, very intriguing. Yes.
Yeah.
So do most of the cases that you guys are detailing in the show, are they mostly of the supernatural sort of nature, like like we would call it a ghost or a spirit, or are there some that deal with something that could be a flesh and blood, like somebody has run into a cryptid sort of animal?
No, we haven't done cryptid at all. Everything's just been focused on things that ghosts, unexplained entities that may or may not be human. So it's something in more the metaphysical sense of our world, like something beyond our understanding. I would like to get into cryptozoology and maybe ufology. That seems to be a different show. I know there's some crossovers, now in paranormal community that think that maybe sometimes ghosts or other non-human entities or interdimensional travelers that are coming into our world. It's possible. I can't say it's impossible because I just don't know. And there's some stories where I go, okay, we're not talking about a ghost here. We're talking about something else. So what is it? Like I said, we don't really dig down trying to explain what it is. We're just more looking at the experience of our eyewitnesses having them report back and share their experience with our viewers.
Well, the reason I ask that is we're just trying to find an angle to get the judge who couldn't join us today his own spot on a TV show, since he had a cryptid experience. We thought, hey, he's a judge, he's got a good standing in the community, and yet he saw a dog man. How do we build a TV show around that?
Yeah, I'm not going to say it's not from a lack of trying, or there might be something that we've been developing that's in that realm. It's always on the board, and we want to do it, and I think it's just a matter of finding the right angle on it.
Well, I think Jason would agree, if the judge got on a TV show, he'd never be able to get his robe on again. It wouldn't go over his head.
No,
so,
it wouldn't.
So with your experience then doing these shows, what are some of the stories that really stand out to you that, from meeting the person and then hearing the story, that you're just got to sit back and say, man, something had to happen, because this person seems so credible to me that this has to be real.
Yeah, there's been a lot that when I heard them, like, wow, like my immediate thought is, why does this person want to share their story? Because if you imagine, if you're a doctor or you're a very well-respected police officer, coming forward and stepping in front of the camera and said, yeah, I saw a ghost, and it chased me, and it followed me home. That doesn't sit well with probably your colleagues. Why would you risk that? Why would you risk exposing yourself? So then you think, well, they're doing this because they feel the need to get these experiences off their chest, because they know they're not alone. And if you're a doctor, this isn't the best bedside approach to dealing with the problem, by telling your patient, like, I broke my leg once, it really hurt. Well, in this case, it's not about breaking a leg. I saw something I can't explain. I saw an entity. I saw a shadow figure in my house, and everywhere I went, it followed it. It normalizes it, and I think that's sort of the brilliance of this show. Same with the police officer, because they're like us. Except for they have a different job, and they might think the world a little differently, but then there's something that's been thrown at them that doesn't really compete well for them. And so with haunted hospitals, when a doctor comes and tells me that they have a story, I'm immediately listening. It's just, you're like, wow. Because for a doctor to step forward and say they had a paranormal experience is quite rare. Police officers as well, they don't always come forward because they're afraid of ridicule. But I think what's great about it makes me, or it should make people feel more comfortable to say, hey, they're just humans like us. They do get scared. They do experience things they can't explain. It's not a weakness. I think they're just being forthright and truthful about who they are and how they see the world. I think another way to. But you asked about specific stories, right?
Yeah. Is there any that really still make your skin crawl?
Haunted hospitals, yeah. There's one where a doctor was followed home by some sort of negative entity, and it not only plagued him, but it plagued his wife and his children who was in their house. And it's really creepy because, he would call it out to try to get rid of it. He would use recordings of sermons to try to get rid of it, to try to disperse it. And it took a really long time for him to get rid of whatever it was. And it's one of the few times where I don't like using the D word, the demon word. I don't like throwing it around because I know it gets thrown around a lot. But I was like, well, there's some very negative entity that's following him for some reason. It eventually left him alone. It took over a year, but he's free and clear that could have been a demon. Might have been. With Paranormal 911, there's a lot of interesting situations where the police or firefighters have come in contact with some sort of paranormal entity. And on the surface, they seem to be maybe malevolent, but the reality is they might just be humans trapped between two worlds, just trying to get a message out. Sometimes that message is misconstrued. I'm trying to think of a really good example of one. There's a few. There's some stories we didn't chase because they were just too hard to recreate. We had one story in Paranormal 911 where a police officer watched a preacher, trying to interpret his last rites to a child. And that was a really creepy story because nobody else saw the preacher when this police officer started asking around, because there was a crowd that was gathered and this boy was injured on the side of the road. Nobody else had seen the preacher, and that really upset him because he's like, well, no, I saw this preacher, but nobody could recall ever seeing a preacher at that scene. And from what I have researched, I know sometimes that these non-human entities could take on a human form so they can get close to humans for whatever their cause. Maybe they're feeding off their negative energy or whatever it is. There could be something sinister about them. That one was creepy, and because he saw this entity in more than one place at this particular accident scene, and I find that one really creepy. The creepiest thing. Oh yeah.
That is so. The police officer. Did the young person end up dying then? That was given the last rites, or he thought were being given the last rites?
No, and that's the beauty of it, is that the officer got mad and yelled at this preacher, told him to go away, and he did. He just sort of got up and left. And so on the circuit, you think, oh, maybe it's the ghost of this nice preacher man, like giving this child last rites. But the child ended up living. So then you think, well, was it this nice, ghost of preacher, or was it something else? And there was no definite face on this preacher. That was the thing. Like, you couldn't really recall his face all that well. Like there was something off about the way he looked. There was something off about the way the preacher walked. And that just makes it even creepier, because there is no explanation about what had transpired other than he had seen this preacher like that. And like I said, in more than one location at this accident scene. And even though he was only several feet away from the boy, trying to hold the crowd back, this preacher just comes out of nowhere and starts saying something to the boy that was barely audible. But it was the body language that suggested that maybe this preacher was giving last rites. But again, maybe that preacher was saying something else. Maybe it was some sort of incantation to get the boy's soul. We don't know. It's creepy. It's super, super creepy.
Oh, that's really creepy. That's really creepy from the fact that it wasn't just that he saw the person, that he interacted with him, that he said something and the thing responded, and then he, it's not like a fleeting shadow figure in the corner or whatever. You're watching something that looks like a real person, and oh wow.
Yeah. In his follow-up investigation of the accident, he was asking some of the witnesses, hey, what did you see on that day, blah, blah. And as a side, he would say, do you guys know who that preacher was? And nobody knew what he was talking about.
Oh my goodness.
And he called up one of the local clergymen at one of the churches and said, hey, on this day, did you have one of your, priests or preachers, was somebody out in the community? And they're like, no one from our congregation. And they said, well, was there anyone visiting, like maybe, from a different parish, whatever it was? And they're like, no, we have no one that came through, stopped by. And that just makes this mystery even larger. It made him even more, I think, more frustrated because he couldn't explain it. That's the thing. Like, he didn't know what he was dealing with. And we don't know. And that's what's creepy. Like, we don't know why.
Right.
What was going on there. That one's creepy. Now, the latest thing that got us for our new show, Paranormal Nightshift, we had this really high caliber restaurateur / real estate agent come on the show. She's very respected, very intelligent in her community, quite known in some circles. And she came onto the show to tell us about an encounter that she had with an entity. And this happened over 20 years ago. She lives in a new city. And she came to us, to the studio for the interview. So she left her home city and then came back where we were filming, which is in Toronto, where she had her encounter 20 years ago. And she told me she was nervous. And I said, well, why are you nervous? And she's like, I haven't been back to Toronto since the incident. You know, it was shortly after the incident that I sold my business, which was a restaurant, and I never came back. And I said, why is that? She said she was afraid to come back. And she said she was afraid that she would have an encounter with the entity. And that gave me a bit of pause, because you're like, okay, I can understand, you know, maybe you're hesitant. But as we were doing the interview, we were really like into the interview. She stopped and she said, I just need a minute. The entity's here. And I had to clarify. I said, what do you mean the entity's here? She said, the entity's in the studio. And I've had other people say that. I've had people that are, you know, clairvoyants and mediums say, you know, there's other people here in the room. They're all good. But this one really freaked me out, because I could see fear welling up inside of her, and she started to shake. And at first I'm thinking, I should just put this on. But you could just feel the whole vibe of the room change, and it got a little bit colder. And then I looked around at our crew. I could look at her. There's, you know, the camera guys beside me, the sound guys just a couple of feet from him. I look at our data person behind us, and they are watching intensely. They're looking at our interviewee, and their body language was also fear. And everyone, you could just feel it change in the room. There was almost panic. And I really wanted to keep rolling tape, but part of me was fearful. And you got to remember, I'm a skeptic. Part of me is fearful that if I continued to allow whatever was happening in the room to occur, if there was some sort of entity in that room that was very negative, and just from hearing her story, it is quite negative, we could have been feeding it, and it could have been growing more powerful. So I stopped the interview, and I put us on a break until we could calm down and clear whatever that negative energy was out of the room. And this is closer to the end of the interview, which is good, because I think we all felt a little bit better that we didn't want to go in for another hour in the interview, because we were actually afraid of what might have happened. And you know, normally I said I would keep the camera rolling, but that one freaked me out. It was one that got to me, and even when I got home that night, I was still thinking about it. And you know, since then she hasn't been back to Toronto. That woman who did the interview. That one was fascinating.
Yeah, very. Yeah, that one would have. Oh man.
well, you also got to think is, okay, so this entity showed up here. So obviously this entity was aware that she was back in town, and maybe this entity's like, you know what? I've been lonely. She's been out of town. This Tobin guy, he doesn't really believe in me. Maybe I can go have some fun with him and follow him home, and you know, see if I can scare him a little bit. I mean, that has to go through your mind, doesn't it? That I don't want this thing following me like it's following her.
Yeah, and I look over my shoulder a lot when something odd happens in my house. You know, maybe something falls that shouldn't fall, like off a shelf, or you know, just those weird, you know, sounds of someone walking across the floor when you're the only one home. You go, all right, maybe it's just the house settling, or you know, maybe I didn't put that you know, box of tea on the counter just right and it fell off. I second guess everything. You know, I try to find logic in what it is I just perceived. But it's these things weigh on me, right? And the scariest thing I've ever experienced that I can't explain was when I was doing the show, when I was doing Haunted Hospital. I had a newborn at the time, and she woke up one night in the middle and we were at my in-laws, and the room that we were staying in was in their basement. And so I got up with the baby. I'm like, okay, get the baby a bottle. And we left the bedroom and went to, there's like a sitting room outside the bedroom in the basement. So we're sitting there, and there was a weird vibe in the air. Like normally I get in the middle of the night with a cranky baby. It's fine, whatever. You're like, baby's hungry. But there's just like this weird energy in the room that was really, almost unsettling. And as I'm feeding the baby stops eating and then really quickly turns her head and starts looking up at the wall where it meets the ceiling opposite from us. And you could see her eyes looking at something, and then she's tracking something with her eyes. And so, of course, I'm looking where she's looking. And we both watched this shadow move across the top of the wall on the ceiling really quickly. And I'm like, no, I didn't see that. No, nothing. That didn't happen. And of course, the baby's eyes are bugging out of her head. I'm like, the baby's seeing it. I'm seeing it. I'm like, what is going on? And I'm thinking, from the shows that I work on, I'm like, nah, that can't happen. But then it happened again. But whatever this shadow was, moved in the opposite direction. I was like, okay, we're seeing something here. So we shifted because the baby was getting scared. So we shifted to a different part of the room. We just sat there for a little while, and that was freaky. And what made it freakier was at that time, unfortunately, my wife's grandmother was terminally ill, and she was actually still in the house. And this is where it gets really creepy. The next morning, of course, everyone's like, "Oh, how'd you sleep? Was the baby up?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." And I said, "Yeah, it was an odd night because the baby saw like a shadow move and it freaked her out." And my mother-in-law said, "Well, Grandma has been seeing this man around the house outside, waiting, and she says that she sees him in the yard because she was still mobile, so she would just sort of sit and stare out the window." And I was like, "Oh, really? That's creepy. Did she say what the man was doing?" Because she didn't speak English very well. And she said, "Yeah, he's waiting for her, and she thinks that maybe it's her husband, so my wife's grandfather." I said, "Oh, so he's just waiting out in the yard?" "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what else has she said or done recently?" Of course, I'm really inquisitive at this point. And she said, "Well, she's been going into her room and packing a bag. And then if you ask her what she's doing, she says, 'I'm getting ready to leave. My husband's here to pick me up.'" So when I heard that, I was like, okay, so something's hanging out that maybe it is my wife's grandfather coming to get his wife. I can't explain it, but it coincides with this weird shadow in the basement. And on subsequent nights in that basement, when I'd be up with the baby, there's a hallway that I would try to rock her back to sleep in my arms if she was not sleeping well. There's certain rooms that if I passed them, which were closer to the grandmother's room, that had a very negative, dark vibe. And maybe I'm misinterpreting that vibe, but I could feel something there. And that really freaked me out. And then unfortunately, several weeks after that, grandmother passed away, and all that negative energy, all those vibes in the room were gone. Those weird vibes I couldn't explain. And I never saw the shadows after that in the basement ever again. And neither did the baby, as far as I know. That was freaky.
Yeah, very much so.
I guess so. And you're a skeptic. I mean, there's people. Oh man. I mean, that's wow. All I could think about when you were talking about that shadow is, do you guys remember the scene in like Exorcist 2 in the old folks' home where the lady crawls behind the guy? He's standing there and she's on the ceiling and she crawls by and like looks down and laughs at him. And
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that would have been enough. Yeah. That would have freaked me out too. But whatever it is, with the passing of the grandmother, it all went away.
it all went away.
Oh my goodness.
And I can't explain that. And part of me thinks, oh, it's just my subconscious from doing these shows, from hearing all these stories about shadow figures or visitors coming to people that are on the, close to the threshold between life and death. There's that veil. Did something come through the veil?
Right.
I don't know. I tried to rationalize it as much as I could, that shadow and the vibe and everything. And I can't explain it, but it definitely freaked me out. And so when people tell me about their experiences, of course I'm going to listen, because I'm still looking for the answers myself. I'm not going to automatically buy into it, but I'm definitely going to be listening, and I'm definitely going to be looking for explanations. But when someone tells me that it freaked them out or it was something they can't explain, I agree with them, because I can't explain it, and I know what it feels like to either be scared and sometimes it's not even scared. Sometimes it's just that feeling of having no explanation, and that's what's really haunting. You don't understand what it is. I'd like to know.
Wow. Well, that's a great story. That story should probably be on one of your shows. Do you think?
Yeah, definitely.
Do you think? I mean, there's a show idea, is all the crazy things that happens while you're making shows. That's a wow.
Yeah, we've had some strange things happen. Like, we've had guests, they tell you their experience, and it's a very negative experience, and then a week later their house burns down, and so they choose not to go on the show because they see it as a bad omen, and I can't blame them. So we've actually had people that we were had slated as guests on the show that because of strange events that happened in their lives, they decided not to do the show. And I don't know, maybe it's because they were talking to us, and whatever entity was in their lives didn't like it, acted out, did something incredibly over the top, or or maybe it's just bad luck. I don't know. It's, again, I can't explain it, but things happen to people. They just don't always explain.
Yeah.
So my advice to our listeners would be, if you run into Tobin at a party, don't talk ghosts, because you may find your house burnt down, your car get a car wreck. You might open. So there it is. You're not getting invited to any more parties. There you go.
Oh man.
Well, Tobin, I know you're super busy, so we'll wrap this up. But I want you to let everybody know what shows they can look for, what channel, what network they can find them, and if they really like the shows, what is the best way to support the shows so that you guys get to keep making the shows?
Yeah, that would be great if we could keep making these shows, because we want to do more, obviously. So the best thing to do first is to find the trilogy. So the Haunted Hospitals, Paranormal 911, and the new show Paranormal Nightshift all air on Travel Channel in the United States. In Canada, the shows air on T+E, and in the United Kingdom, they were showing on Quest Red, but now they're going to be on one of the Discovery shows, channel shows, so Travel Escape UK. Don't quote me on that, because it all depends on the distributor. But they always sort of appear this time of year, late summer. We start airing the new seasons, or closer to Halloween. And the other time they start to air as well. And I'm still trying to get a beat on when Haunted Hospitals Season 3 airs. I'm going to guess it's going to be first thing in the new year, because we're filming it right now.
Nice.
But the best way to support the shows when you're just curious or trying to find out more information about them, on Facebook, there is a fan page that some nice, awesome people created for us. that they always seem to know more about our shows than we do, or when they're going to air, or what channel is going to air on. Because, like I said, sometimes our distributors sell the shows, and we don't get all that information. But there's the Paranormal 911 Haunted Hospitals fan page that they can join, which there's sort of there's a mixed mash of different pages that have all come together as one, but the fans seem to really, really like them, and so they all sort of hang out and they post stuff about the shows. We try to provide information on the shows, or when we know stuff, or we try to provide behind the scenes footage sometimes, or stills, so you get to see somehow how the shows are made. But that's the best way to find information about the shows. That would be my advice for anyone that's curious to checking these things out.
Okay,
all right, great.
The actual name of the page is Fans of Paranormal 911 Haunted Hospitals Paranormal Emergency and PNS. That's
one whole title.
That's one whole title. It's a mouthful, but it's 4 shows have been sort of merged into one fan page, because I think it's the theme of the shows that makes them sort of jive together.
Well, holy smokes! You can't get that on a T-shirt. What are these guys are limiting their swag sales there? I mean, come on. I mean, imagine that bumper sticker and wrap around.
It'd wrap around a car. It'd be a car wrap.
It would be a car wrap, and it's amazing that fans created it, and then they're like, hey, check out this fan page we made for you guys, and then we started going on and visiting it, and it's amazing the things that people post, and the reactions to some of the episodes that they have. Paranormal, I would say right now, Paranormal Nightshift is in the lead for some of the scariest eyewitness encounters that we've had, and I've just seen a couple cuts of some of the episodes that are going to be airing, and they scare me, and I don't scare that easily. So it says something about that show. Definitely entertainment value, but there's also good takeaway, because there's still a lot of, well, what was that? What actually happened there?
Right.
And I think the more that people can, understand that this happens to everyone from different walks of life, that I think the more it normalizes the world of the paranormal. And also helps people say, hey, let's look into this more. Let's do some more research, so the paranormal investigators can get more legitimacy to what they do. And, in the end, maybe we can answer some of these questions.
Yes, exactly.
Expand our understanding of our universe and beyond. So,
yeah.
Our hats are definitely off to you for doing the real work and getting these shows on the air, because a lot of people love these shows, and it's understandable that people put together fan pages and stuff. So our hats are off to you, because you do have a really cool job, for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
So and we appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day and talking to us about the show. Hoping all our fans will then go out, at the very least, DVR the shows so that you can eventually watch them. So Tobin can keep his baby needs some new shoes.
Absolutely.
You heard?
Absolutely. Keep it going. Fans continue to show interest. We get answers, and we can keep shows like this coming. And that's what we're all about here at the From the Shadows podcast.
That's right.
Well,
that's right.
Shane and Jason, I appreciate you having me on your podcast. It's always good to talk to people, and that's what I like about doing these shows. I get to meet people from different walks of life, and they have their stories, and that's what really keeps me going, because people are just fascinating. They always have something fascinating to say.
Yes.
Everyone's got a story.
Hey, look, in our books, you got one of the best stories that happened to you. So I mean,
that's fascinating.
That's a great story. I mean, I'm glad I wasn't sitting in the basement doing the podcast like I do sometimes, because I'd have been probably running out of the basement. Like, hoping I didn't see my own shadow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I'm just glad my in-laws' basement doesn't have that weird, creepy vibe anymore. I'll tell you that.
Oh yeah, I bet that right there would be kind of unnerving. That's for sure.
All right, Tobin. Well, we'll let you get going, but thank you so much, and good luck on the new show. And we'll put some links up there so people can see what's happening, and hopefully you can get some new fans out of it.
Yes. Thank you, Tobin. I appreciate you coming on.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Have a great day. We'll talk to you. We'll be in touch.
Yep. Take care.
We'll talk to you soon.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the From the Shadows podcast. Until next time, never shy away from the darkness or what may be lurking in the shadows. We are out.